This is every nightmare critter from Poppy Playtime Chapter 4 explained. Now, I know what you're thinking. Poppy Theory, why is this video over an hour long? It only takes like 2 minutes to explain each character. Not only is this an explanation video, but I've provided theories for each and every character. What their role is, how their personalities will be expressed, and what do their personalities symbolize. Feel free to leave this video to the side while you do schoolwork, chores, or while you're about to head to bed. So with all that being said, sit back, relax, grab some snacks, and enjoy every single nightmare critter from Poppy Playtime Chapter 4 explained. We just got a huge drop from Mob Entertainment regarding the sheep character, and as of writing this script, another nightmare critters dropped, so make sure to watch the entire video to be up to date with all of the new Chapter 4 content. But this sheep, who we saw in the Chapter 4 teaser trailer, finally has an official name, Baba Chops. She's part of a toy line called Nightmare Critters, which already hints that this is something darker than what we've seen before. Now, if we look closely at the screenshot that Mob dropped, there's quite a bit to take in. Baba Chops is described as the black sheep of the group, which, right off the bat, gives us some clues. She prefers to be left alone, distant, and low energy, needing a lot of coaxing to get out of her house. But the thing that really stands out here is that skull pendant. It's almost like a signature of something sinister, a clear contrast to the other toys we've seen. Then we've got her scent, anise. If you know anything about anise, it's got a strong, somewhat bitter scent. It's not your typical cute toy smell, which adds to the idea that this character was always meant to be something more twisted. Now, where do we go from here? Let's take a step back and start theorizing, because there's a lot of questions that pop up when we look at this new drop. First off, why does this toy even exist? Baba Chops seems so far removed from the typical smiling critters or other characters we've been introduced to in Poppy Playtime. The nightmare critters? This could easily be some kind of special Halloween version of the smiling critters, right? Think about it. Every big toy company makes limited edition, holiday themed products. It makes sense that Playtime Co. would do something like this, and a Halloween version of the smiling critters would fit the bill. Maybe the Nightmare Critters line was designed to capitalize on that seasonal demand. The twisted design and darker tone would definitely appeal to a different crowd, and Playtime Co. would have known exactly how to market that. But here's where it gets interesting. If Baba Chops is from a Nightmare Critters toy line, why is she so violent? We've seen her tear through Dog Day in the trailer, and her introduction paints her as more than just a creepy toy. She's a predator. Could this violent nature be tied to the personality of the toy itself? Or could it be the result of the kid who was experimented on to create her? We know from the lore that Playtime Co. used orphans for their Bigger Bodies initiative, so what if Baba Chops was the product of one of those experiments? Maybe the child who became Baba Chops was troubled, isolated, and quiet, much like the toy's description. This could explain the sheep's distant and violent behavior. Think about it. If you take a child with deep emotional issues and transform them into a toy, those traits wouldn't just disappear, they'd be amplified. Baba Chops' low energy, quiet demeanor, and need for space could easily stem from a child who had a tough upbringing. But then the violent nature? That could be the side effect of whatever experimentation Playtime Co. put them through. This brings us to another big question. Why would the scientists at Playtime Co. experiment on this toy in the first place? What would they be hoping to achieve? We know from Chapter 3 and the various VHS tapes that Playtime Co. was obsessed with creating the perfect toy, one that could do more than just entertain. They wanted toys that could think, act, and perhaps even replace humans. But Baba Chops doesn't seem like she's here to play nice. Her entire design and behavior seem to lean more toward aggression. Could it be that the scientists were trying to create toys with survival instincts? We've seen the toys eat each other, attack humans, and do whatever it takes to survive. Maybe Baba Chops was designed with this in mind, a toy that's meant to eliminate the weak and survive at all costs. That might even explain the skull pendant. It's a symbol of death after all, and it could represent her role as a predator within the toy ecosystem. But what about the prototype? We know from previous chapters that the prototype has been manipulating the toys behind the scenes. Could the prototype have done its own form of experimentation on Baba Chops? Well, this is where things get a little murky. Baba Chops is a part of her own toy line, Nightmare Critters, which suggests that she was designed long before the prototype started messing with the factory. She already has a backstory, a design, and a purpose, so it wouldn't really make sense for the prototype to have tampered with her directly. However, that doesn't mean the prototype hasn't influenced her. We've seen how the prototype can control and manipulate the other toys, like Huggy Wuggy and Mommy Longlegs. It's possible that Baba Chops, while not directly experimented on by the prototype, has fallen under its control in some way. After all, the factory is in chaos, and the deeper we go, the more dangerous the toys become. Now, let's circle back to some of the big questions we asked earlier, specifically why Baba Chops is so violent. Is it the toy's personality or the child's? It's possible that it's a mix of both. If Baba Chops was created from a child who already had a difficult personality, one that was distant, low energy, and perhaps even angry, then the experiments would have amplified those traits. But on top of that, the toy itself seems designed to be more sinister. That skull pendant isn't just for decoration. It represents something darker, something more aggressive than we've seen from other toys in the game. And that brings us to the next big question. Why experiment on Baba Chops at all? Playtime Co. was known for pushing boundaries when it came to their toys. They wanted creations that could do more, think more, and survive longer. But Baba Chops seems like she's on a whole different level. It's almost like she was created to be a predator within the toy line. Her distant nature, combined with her violent outbursts, suggests that she was designed to be the top of the food chain, at least among the Nightmare Critters. Could this be part of a larger experiment to see how far Playtime Co. could push their creations? Or are these toys just a Halloween version of the Smiling Critters? Either way, Baba Chops stands out as a unique and terrifying creation. Finally, we come to one of the last questions. Will we see other characters from this toy line? Well, it looks like we already got our answer. With the release of Icky Licky, the second Nightmare Critter, it's clear Mob Games is introducing more characters from this toy line. Baba Chops wasn't a one-time deal. She's part of something bigger. This entire Nightmare Critter collection is designed to stand apart from the Smiling Critters, offering us a darker, twisted version of what we've come to expect from Playtime Co. Now, let's focus on Icky Licky himself. Just by looking at him, you get that vibe. This character is fast-paced, chaotic, and impossible to keep up with. He's designed in stark black and yellow, which is striking, but also hints at his energetic, erratic nature. The wide smile and intense eyes hint at the fact that this is a mischievous character, and that ties perfectly with the personality we've been given. A poor sport, someone who challenges everyone and anyone, but can't take the loss. He's got natural talent, but he's constantly deflecting blame. And the fact that his scent is coffee, that's a clever detail, symbolizing his energy and inability to sit still, like someone who's had way too much caffeine. But here's the big question. Will Icky Licky be an enemy in Chapter 4? Honestly, it seems likely. Baba Chops is already lined up to be a key antagonist, and it wouldn't be surprising if the other Nightmare Critters are introduced as threats too. In fact, it might make sense for Icky Licky to show up in fast-paced, reaction-based sequences. Given his personality, he could easily be the type of enemy that relentlessly pursues the player, throwing constant challenges their way and getting more aggressive if he's losing. Imagine running through a series of tight corridors, trying to outpace him while he throws obstacles at you, all the while taunting you about how he'll win. That would be his style. Next, we have to ask, will we see glimpses of his personality traits when we finally come across him? Absolutely. Mob Games has made sure that every character in Poppy Playtime stands out in terms of personality, and Icky Licky would be no different. His cocky, poor sport attitude is bound to show up in the way he interacts with the player. I can already imagine him challenging the player to races or competitions, but the second he's about to lose, he either changes the rules or makes up an excuse for why it didn't count. Maybe he'll even have voice lines that match his personality, constantly talking trash or making excuses whenever he's at a disadvantage. It's almost like he's more concerned with not losing than he is with actually winning. Now, let's break down the Nightmare Critters logo. This isn't just a fun, colorful design. There's a meaning behind it. Each letter seems to represent one of the Nightmare Critters. Take a look at the I in Nightmare. That's Baba Chops. Her distinct skull pendant and her darker tone show up right there in the design. Then we've got the R, which, if you look at the color, is clearly designed after Icky Licky. This logo isn't just a random design choice. It's teasing us, showing that each Nightmare Critter will play a role, and their personalities are baked into the very fabric of this toy line. So what does this all mean for Chapter 4? I think we're going to see the Nightmare Critters become a big part of the gameplay. With Baba Chops and Icky Licky already confirmed, it's likely that we'll see more characters from this line appear as enemies. But more than that, we might see their unique personalities influence the puzzles and challenges we face. Icky Licky, with his fast-paced and competitive nature, could introduce timed challenges or reaction-based gameplay. Maybe there's a section where you have to beat him in a race. But just when you think you're winning, he changes the rules to make it nearly impossible. It would fit his personality to a T, but let's not forget the darker undertone here. These Nightmare Critters seem to be a part of something more sinister. They're not like the smiling critters. They don't play nice. And with their unique design and abilities, I think they're a direct result of Playtime Co.'s experimentation. There's a reason these toys are called Nightmare Critters. Maybe they were designed to scare, to control, or even to test the limits of fear in children. And if that's the case, then we're going to be facing some serious threats in the coming chapter. Alright, let's talk about Raby Baby. She's the newest Nightmare Critter, and there's a lot to unpack with her. We've already seen characters like Baba Chops and Icky Licky, but Raby Baby brings something new to the table. She's got a big personality, loves to gossip, and has no boundaries. In fact, if there's something juicy to talk about, she's already spreading it. If she doesn't have anything to gossip about, no problem, she'll just make something up. So let's dive into her design and figure out what makes her tick. First off, her scent is bubblegum. Now, we know from previous Nightmare Critters like Icky Licky, who smells like coffee, that the scent isn't just a random choice. It's connected to the character's personality. Bubblegum is a fun, sweet, and kind of innocent at first, right? When you think about it, bubblegum is also sticky, clingy, and hard to get rid of. That's exactly how Raby Baby operates. She clings to secrets and gossip, and once she has something on you, it's hard to shake her off. She's not just eavesdropping for fun, she's sticking around to cause trouble. And the bubblegum scent? It's like a mask, covering up her true intentions with something sugary and sweet. But deep down, she's ready to cause chaos. Her gossip could be the thing that turns allies against you, or even causes enemies to find you when you least expect it. Next, let's talk about what role Raby Baby might play in Chapter 4. We've seen from other Nightmare Critters that each of them brings something unique to the table. Icky Licky is a poor sport, always complaining and making excuses. Baba Chops is distant, quiet, and prefers to be left alone. So where does Raby Baby fit in? Well, her whole thing is gossip and eavesdropping, which means she's likely not going to be chasing you down like Huggy Wuggy or Mommy Longlegs. Instead, Raby Baby is probably just going to mess with your head. She might spread false information, twist what you know, or even make you doubt your allies. Imagine working with a character that you can trust, only to find out Raby Baby has fed them lies. Suddenly, that ally turns on you. Or maybe Raby Baby overhears your plans to outsmart an enemy and she goes and tells them what you're up to. She's not the kind of character that's gonna kill you outright, but she'll definitely set the stage for your downfall by turning others against you. That's where her real danger lies. So how will we see her personality expressed in the game? One way they could show off Raby Baby's personality is through the environment. We might come across rooms that are filled with gossip, like notes or recordings left behind by Raby Baby. You could hear whispers or bits of conversation that make you question what's real and what's not. She might even leave behind false clues or misleading information that sends you in the wrong direction. Picture this, you're in a room trying to figure out a puzzle and you hear Raby Baby giggling somewhere nearby. You follow the sound thinking it's a clue, only to realize she's led you into a trap. Her gossiping could also be tied into the game's mechanics. Maybe Raby Baby listens in on what you do and relays that information to other enemies. If you're trying to sneak through a room, Raby Baby could overhear you and tip off a more dangerous enemy. She's like a spy, almost one step ahead of you, making sure you never feel safe. Her design even gives us hints about her personality. She's pink, bubbly, and looks playful, but don't let that fool you. Just like bubblegum, she's sweet on the outside, but once she gets a hold of you, it's gonna be really hard to get her away. Not to mention that her big ears are perfect for eavesdropping. Now, let's dive a little deeper into Raby Baby's backstory. We know that Playtime Co. has a habit of turning kids' personalities into these twisted toys. What if Raby Baby was once a kid who loved to gossip? She could have been that kid who knew everyone's secrets and couldn't resist telling them to anyone who'd listen. But in the hands of Playtime Co., that personality trait was amplified and turned into something dangerous. Now, instead of just being a nosy kid, Raby Baby is a walking, talking gossip machine who thrives on misinformation. And that's where things really get dark. Like the other nightmare critters, Raby Baby was likely created to serve a specific purpose for the factory. Maybe the scientists wanted to use her to control the other toys by spreading rumors and lies. After all, controlling information is a powerful tool, and Raby Baby could have been designed to manipulate both the toys and the factory workers. Imagine a toy that's able to turn the tide of an entire situation just by planting a few well-timed lies. That's Raby Baby's power. But here's an interesting theory. What if Raby Baby wasn't just an experiment by the scientists? What if the prototype had a hand in her creation? We know that the prototype has been manipulating events behind the scenes, and Raby Baby's ability to spread information would be incredibly useful to him. She could gather intel, spread false information, and keep everyone in the factory on edge. But there's a twist. Raby Baby has her own toy line, which suggests she might not be directly controlled by the prototype. But there's a problem. She could represent a different branch of the factory's experiments, one that focused more on psychological manipulation rather than physical threats. But whether or not the prototype is involved, one thing is clear. She's not gonna chase you down and kill you, but she'll mess with your head, make you question everything, and turn the world of Playtime Co. upside down. Just like I said with the other nightmare critters, there's a good chance we'll see more of them show up in chapter 4. Each one of these characters has a unique personality and role, so it wouldn't be surprising if more of them pop up to cause trouble. The Nightmare Critters logo itself also gives us some hints. As said in a previous video, if you closely look at the design, you'll notice that the I in the logo looks like Baba Chops, and the R looks like Icky Licky. This suggests that each letter in the logo might represent a different character, meaning we could have even more nightmare critters to meet. But what about the rest of the letters? If we follow this trend, each character might embody a different design element of the logo, giving us hints about their appearance and personality. The C clearly looks to be some type of fire-breathing dragon, as you can see flames right in the middle of the letter. Seems like Raby Baby was the letter S, so all we have left are the two T's, the E, and the R. The E honestly looks like it's going to be some type of aquatic creature, as the top looks like a fin of some sort. and the R looks like it got a chunk eaten out of it. I don't know if that's due to the letter E or something else. The two T's don't really have any personality at all, so I don't know what this could mean. But for now, Raby Baby is the one we're focusing on, and she might be a handful once we finally encounter her in chapter 4. We've already gotten 3 new drops from the Nightmare Critters, and now we've got Alistair Gator. But here's where it gets interesting. What does this character mean for Poppy Playtime chapter 4, and how are we supposed to deal with him when we finally come across him? Let's break it down. Will Alistair Gator be an enemy in chapter 4? If we look at the direction the game's going, with each of the Nightmare Critters seemingly getting their own distinct role, I have to say yes. Alistair is definitely going to be an enemy in chapter 4, but here's the catch. I don't think he's going to be a traditional enemy. In fact, I'd say that he's more likely to be a slow, lurking threat than a fast-paced pursuer like Huggy Wuggy or even the quick-footed Icky Licky. You see, Alistair's whole deal, at least from what we've been teased so far, is patience. He's not the kind of enemy who's going to charge after you. Instead, I think Alistair is going to be the type of enemy who waits for you to make a mistake. But will we see glimpses of his personality traits when we finally come across him? Absolutely, and this is where things really get fun. Alistair's personality, that laid-back, lazy attitude, is going to play a massive role in how we interact with him in the game. I mean, we've seen it with the other Nightmare Critters, right? Icky Licky's competitiveness is likely going to translate into some kind of challenge or race. Raby Baby is all about gossip, so we'll probably see her trying to mess with the player's head, maybe by spreading misinformation or setting traps. So what about Alistair? Well, I'm willing to bet that his laziness and patience are going to factor heavily into the way we deal with him. Maybe he's lurking in the flooded areas of the factory, biding his time, waiting for the player to walk into his zone. Maybe we'll even have to outweight him, navigating through the factory without alerting him, kind of like a stealth section. But what about his scent, Sandalwood? What does it symbolize? We've already seen how the scents of the other Nightmare Critters tie into their personalities. For example, Icky Licky has a coffee scent, which fits with his high energy, always on the move personality. Raby Baby's bubblegum scent matches her playful but intrusive nature. She's always in your face, sticking around whether you want her there or not. So what about Alistair? Sandalwood is a bit of a curveball, but it makes sense when you think about it. Sandalwood is calm, relaxing, and even soothing, and that fits with Alistair's lazy, patient attitude. But here's where it gets darker. Sandalwood has an earthy quality, something grounding but also ancient. It's often associated with something deeper, more spiritual, which leads me to believe that Alistair might have a more sinister side that we haven't fully seen yet. Maybe his laziness is just a cover for something more calculated. Maybe he's not just waiting for the player to make a mistake, but actively manipulating the environment around him, forcing the player into a situation where they have no choice but to face him. But why would Playtime Co. even experiment on a character like Alistair? This is one of the big questions and is definitely worth diving into. When you look at characters like Huggy Wuggy or Mommy Longlegs, it's clear that Playtime Co. was experimenting with aggression, speed, and control. But Alistair? Alistair's lazy, laid back, even indifferent. So why experiment on someone like him? I think the answer lies in that patience. Alistair isn't just lazy, he's waiting. And I think that's exactly what Playtime Co. was trying to tap into. They weren't looking to create another fast, aggressive enemy. They wanted something that could outlast the player, something that didn't need to chase you down because it could just wait for you to make a mistake. In a way, that's even more terrifying. You can outrun a fast enemy, you can outsmart a fast enemy, but how do you outlast someone who's just waiting for you to mess up? But here's another question. Did the prototype have a hand in Alistair's creation? This is where things get a little tricky. We know the prototype has been involved in some of the darker, more twisted aspects of the toy experiments, manipulating events from behind the scenes. But Alistair feels different. He's got his own toy line. He's a part of the Nightmare Critters, which seems to be a separate entity from the prototype prototype's direct influence. That said, it wouldn't surprise me if the prototype had some kind of connection to Alistair. Maybe the prototype didn't create him, but he could definitely be using Alistair as a part of his bigger plan. After all, the prototype is all about control, and what better way to control someone than by forcing them into a situation where they're up against an enemy that they can't outrun or outfight. Now, let's take a step back and look at the Nightmare Critters logo. We've already figured out that the I in Nightmare is Baba Chops, and the R is Licky. So where does Alistair fit? Well, if you look closely at the green accents in the logo, it's pretty clear that Alistair is represented by the G. That deep earthy green matches his laid-back, swamp-dwelling nature, and I think it's a perfect fit for his role in the game. But what's even more interesting is how the logo is slowly revealing more about the lineup of critters. With each new drop, we're getting more clues about how these characters are going to fit into the larger story of Poppy Playtime. Alright, we speculated enough. Let's get into the details of who Alistair Gator really is. Alistair is described as an all-around lazy guy. If he could, he'd spend all day in the water doing next to nothing. He's not the type to hustle, not the type to chase things down. In fact, he's the complete opposite of someone like Icky Licky. Alistair believes in the philosophy that good things have to come to me eventually. He's much more about waiting for things to happen rather than making them happen. But here's the thing, just because he's lazy doesn't mean he's not dangerous. Gators in real life are ambush predators, and I think that's exactly what we're gonna see from Alistair. He's gonna wait, bide his time, and when the moment is right, he's gonna strike. Simon Smoke is the newest Nightmare Critter to join the lineup, and he might be the most obnoxious of them all. Now, if you've been following the Nightmare Critters drops like I have, you know that each one of these characters brings something unique to the table, whether it's Baba Chop's distant, laid-back attitude or Icky Licky's shameless excuse making. Simon, though, takes things to a whole new level. This guy's here to remind everyone just how cool and popular he thinks he is. So let's break him down piece by piece and answer some of the burning questions about what role he might play in Poppy Playtime Chapter 4. We'll also dig into the meaning behind his scent, speculate on how he'll interact with other characters, and talk about what that wood smoke symbolism could mean. And of course, I'll save some time at the end to reveal how he fits into the rest of the Nightmare Critters lineup. First off, let's talk about appearance. Simon's a red dragon covered in bold colors that immediately scream, "Look at me." His sharp yellow horns, the $sign around his neck, and his smug expression all work together to tell you exactly what he's about. This guy has charisma, but not the good kind. The kind that makes you want to roll your eyes. His whole vibe is like he's the star of his own show, and we're just the audience meant to admire him. He's flashy, he's loud, and he's not afraid to flaunt it. Now, why a dragon? It makes sense if you think about it. Dragons are often symbols of power, wealth, and sometimes arrogance, and Simon definitely embodies that arrogance. He's not just here to be a part of the Nightmare Critters crew, he's here to make it his crew. That $sign around his neck, it's like he's trying to show off his worth in the most obnoxious way possible. You're not a SoundCloud rapper, bro. Stop it. He's got this whole "I'm better than you" attitude, and he's not subtle about it. The character description even tells us that he's the kind of guy who always makes sure everyone knows just how popular he is. Simon doesn't just want attention, he craves it. But here's the thing, this cool guy act isn't just for show. He actually wins, almost always. Which brings us to one of the first questions. What does this mean for us as players in Chapter 4? Could Simon Smoke be one of the most powerful Poppy Playtime characters and be able to back up his trash talk with that strength? Let's be real, Poppy Playtime has always been about unexpected twists. So while Simon might seem like the kind of guy who's too cocky for his own good, there's a good chance that arrogance actually gives him an edge. Picture this. You're navigating a dark corridor in the deepest parts of the factory, and there's Simon Smoke bragging about how he's already beaten everyone else who's tried to make it this far. You can almost imagine him taunting you, saying things like, "Oh, you think you're gonna beat me? Good luck." He's the kind of character who would have a bit of dialogue here and there, constantly reminding you that you're just another player in his game. Now, the second question I have is about his scent. Wood smoke. What could that possibly symbolize? If we're looking at this from a purely symbolic perspective, wood smoke is often associated with things like campfires, warmth, or even destruction, depending on the context. Maybe Simon's wood smoke scent ties into his fiery nature as a dragon. He's got this underlying tone of danger, like a fire that's just waiting to burn. Wood smoke also lingers, doesn't it? It sticks around, just like Simon's overbearing personality. Once you've encountered him, you're not likely to forget him. So perhaps the scent is a nod to his lasting impression, or the trail of chaos he leaves behind. There's something almost territorial about wood smoke too. If you smell it, you know someone's been there before you, claiming the space. Maybe Simon's scent symbolizes how he marks his territory within the factory. If he's in chapter 4, he's not just gonna let you pass through without knowing who was there first. He's owning the place. Next up, let's talk about Simon's role in chapter 4. Will he be an actual enemy? I think there's a good chance that he'll be a more active antagonist than some of the other nightmare critters. His competitive nature practically begs for it. If there's any character in the lineup that would relish a direct confrontation, it's Simon. He'd probably set up traps or obstacles just to prove a point, to show he's won before you even had a chance to compete. Imagine a sequence where Simon challenges you to some kind of twisted game, like a deadly race or a puzzle that he claims to be solved ages ago. He's not just content with getting in your way. He wants to know that he's already conquered whatever challenges lie ahead. So in chapter 4, we could be looking at a character who doesn't just ambush you like Huggy Wuggy or creep around in the background like Mommy Longlegs. Simon might be right there in your face, mocking your every move, daring you to keep up. And because of his personality, he probably set things up so that even if you do succeed, he'd have some excuse ready, like, "Oh, I was just going easy on you." But let's move on to another aspect. How will we see his personality expressed in the game? Given his description, I think it's safe to assume that Simon's arrogance will be a big part of any interaction with him. He's the type who would constantly be throwing insults, little jabs about how slow you are, how you're never gonna make it. This could come through in voice lines or in environmental cues. Posters of him scattered throughout the factory, boasting about his accomplishments. Maybe graffiti that he scrawled on the walls about being the king of Playtime Co. or something like that. It's easy to imagine Simon leaving little reminders everywhere, almost as if he's created a fan club for himself. Perhaps there are even little toys or collectibles related to him scattered around, each one with a tag that reads something like Simon Smoke #1. But here's a fun twist to consider. What if Simon's biggest weakness is his own ego? The developers might give us opportunities to use his arrogance against him. Maybe he underestimates you in certain puzzles, or he's too busy bragging to notice that you've outsmarted him. In a way, he could be his own worst enemy. And that brings us to the bigger picture of the Nightmare Critters lineup. If we've got Baba Chops, Icky Licky, Raby Baby, and now Simon Smoke, how do they all fit together? It's possible that each of them represents a different aspect of the factory's experiments. While Baba Chops seems reserved and guarded, and Icky Licky is all about deflection, Simon's role might be to showcase the results of unchecked pride and vanity. Maybe these critters were designed to mirror human traits, taking those traits to their most extreme forms. Simon's pride could be a reflection of the factory's own hubris, the idea that they can create life, control it, and make it serve their purposes. So if we're looking at Simon in the grand scheme of chapter 4, it's not just about dealing with a cool guy who's all talk. It's about confronting the darker side of creation itself. As we descend deeper into the factory, we're not just facing creatures designed to scare us. We're facing creatures that embody the factory's own twisted psychology. Simon's obsession with being the best, with winning at all costs, could be a direct product of the experiments that brought him to life. He's not just a character in the game, He's a mirror reflecting back to the factory's own need to dominate everything in its path. So as we prepare to encounter Simon Smoke, it's worth keeping this in mind. We're not just up against a nightmare critter, we're up against a piece of the factory's soul, a fragment of its own monstrous personality, brought to life and ready to prove that it's better than anything else. The newest and 6th nightmare critter is Poe, and right away, the name stands out. There's no frill, no added words to hint at gender or personality, just Poe, and it fits. This isn't a character who's trying to impress or needs a flashy title. Poe's just Poe. They don't fit neatly into a boy or girl category either. They're an enigma wrapped in feathers, and that alone makes you wonder what their role in chapter 4 might be. But first, let's break down what we see. Poe's a raven, and they're draped in this dark, ominous purple. They wear a pendant with a cloud and lightning bolt symbol. An interesting choice, since it suggests some stormy, unpredictable traits. Maybe Poe's the type to go from calm to chaos in seconds, like a sudden storm on an otherwise clear day. But now, let's dig into what we know about Poe's personality. The description tells us they hate the sun, almost like it's an insult to their very existence. Almost like a Discord mod. To Poe, daylight is unnecessary, maybe even cruel. They'd much rather be somewhere dark, lurking in the shadows, hanging out in graveyards, or listening to music that probably isn't the cheeriest playlist. Let's be honest. This character embodies that brooding, slightly rebellious vibe, the one who insists they're not going through a phase. But it seems like this behavior has been going on for a lifetime, which brings us to our first question. What does Poe's scent, cinnamon, actually symbolize? Cinnamon's a warm, spicy scent, something that stands out and lingers. It's a bit ironic given Poe's cold, dark persona, but maybe that's intentional. The contrast could mean that while Poe's all about the darkness and mystery, there's a spark, a warmth underneath it all. Think about it. Cinnamon's the kind of scent that catches you off guard. It's comforting but bold, a bit fiery. It might even hint that Poe's brooding isn't just about the coldness of darkness. Maybe it's about a fire that's been buried deep down, anger that simmered for so long it's almost become part of their core. So does the cinnamon scent mean there's more to Poe than just gloom? Or could it represent a hidden passion, a secret that adds layers to this otherwise dark character? Let's move on to the next question. What role will Poe play in chapter 4? We've seen the other nightmare critters, and they each bring something unique to the table. With Poe though, I think we're dealing with a character who's going to be more psychological. They're not the type to charge at you or pull you into a chase. Instead, imagine a scenario where Poe's watching you from the shadows, testing your nerves rather than your physical abilities. But if you're navigating through the dark, barely able to see, and all you hear is the short flap of wings or an eerie melody drifting through the corridors, Poe might be out to kill you. Well, Poe might not be able to kill you outright. Instead, they could be a character who leads you deeper into the factory's mysteries, almost like a guide, but with intentions that are far from pure. Imagine wandering through a graveyard-like section of the factory, tombstones everywhere, and suddenly seeing Poe perched on one, just watching. They could make cryptic comments hinting at what's to come, and then disappear into the shadows before you can get any answers. Poe's role might be to instill a sense of dread, to make you feel like you're always being watched. They could show up when you least expect it, causing you to question every corner you turn. Which leads to the next question. Will we see Poe's personality expressed through environmental storytelling? I've asked this question for every nightmare critter, and yes. Imagine dark corridors that echo with Poe's footsteps, or rooms filled with remnants of what they left behind. Feathers, broken records, maybe even scratch marks on the walls. Poe's presence could be felt even when they're not there, adding a level of suspense that keeps you on edge. And then there's the music. We know Poe's into music, so what if that plays a key role in their interactions? Imagine hearing faint music in the distance, following it, and then finding yourself in a room filled with speakers blaring an eerie tune. Suddenly, the music stops, and you see Poe standing silently, wings slightly spread as if they've been expecting you all along. Poe's love for music could be a way for them to control the environment, to set the tone, making you feel like you're a guest in their dark world. But it's not just about what Poe can do to you, it's also about why they're doing it. Which brings us to another question. Why a raven, and what does that mean for the story? Ravens have always symbolized death, mystery, and intelligence. They're messengers of the unknown, often associated with omens and dark forebodings. So maybe Poe's here as a form of foreshadowing for what's to come, a reminder that the deeper you go into the factory, the more twisted and dark it's gonna get. Ravens are also known for their cunning, which might make Poe one of the most strategic characters we've faced yet. They could lead you into traps, manipulate the environment, and even trick you into thinking you're safe, only to strike you when you lay your guard down. With Poe, you're not just dealing with a brute force threat, you're dealing with someone who's constantly watching, calculating, and waiting for the perfect moment to reveal their next move. So how does this all fit into the bigger picture? If Poe's role in chapter 4 is to be a kind of guide or antagonist, they're likely going to be pushing you towards something dark, maybe even to the heart of the factory's most twisted secrets. And it wouldn't be surprising if Poe has their own agenda, something they're not willing to reveal until the very end. But let's think about their presence among the other nightmare critters. We've got Baba Chops with that isolated vibe, Icky Licky is the sore loser, Raby Baby is the liar, Simon Smoke as the narcissist, and now Poe, the embodiment of angst and rebellion. Together, they're like a twisted family, each one representing a different facet of darkness and complexity, which leaves us wondering, what other personalities might we see among the rest of the nightmare critters? Could they be Poe's allies, or are they rivals trying to fight for control of different parts of the factory? And what about the cloud pendant with the lightning bolt? It's another mystery, a symbol that suggests storms, conflict, and maybe even sudden explosive anger. The lightning bolts could be a hint that Poe isn't just a passive observer. They're capable of striking when the time's right, unleashing that pent-up rage in a way that's as shocking as a bolt of lightning. So as we look ahead to chapter 4, Poe feels like a character who's going to challenge us not just physically, but mentally. They'll test our ability to stay calm in the dark, to navigate through an environment that's constantly shifting, and to face the fear of the unknown. And with that cloud pendant, we're reminded that storms are unpredictable, just like Poe. At the end of the day, Poe's not just another toy. They're a force of nature, a creature of the night who's here to make sure we never feel truly safe. The newest and 7th nightmare critter is Tui, and yup, another single name nightmare critter, just like Poe. No frills, no extra words, just Tui. And if you're thinking that name sounds familiar, it might be because it's a clear nod to Ratatouille, that classic movie about a rat with a knack for cooking. But unlike the rat who dreams of being a chef, Tui's got a different kind of passion. Literal garbage. Yep, Tui's the self-proclaimed trash rodent. And that title alone tells us a lot about this character's vibe. So let's get into what we know about Tui so far and start to unpack the mysteries surrounding this little critter. First, let's take a look at Tui's appearance. Tui's got a classic gray rat look with big, bright eyes and a mischievous grin that tells you they're always up to something. They've got these large pink ears, one of which has this jagged, patched up look like it's been through a rough time. And then there's that outfit, a little skeleton fishbone on the chest, like a badge of honor. Tui's got this casual, almost carefree look, like they're ready to scurry around, find something interesting in the trash, and then chat your ear off about it. pun intended. Speaking of chatting, Tui is also known for being a talker. They're described as a lively conversationalist, which is funny because according to the description, they don't actually have much to say. So you've got a character who loves to talk, but not exactly about deep topics. Tui's the kind of character who will give you their insights on anything and everything, whether or not it's actually useful. Imagine trying to navigate some tense, dark corridor in the Playtime Co. factory, and there's Tui rambling on about the different types of junk they found. Not exactly the type of character you'd want to run into if you're trying to keep your focus. And then, of course, there's the scent, petrichor. Petrichor is that smell you get when rain hits dry earth, a fresh, earthy scent that a lot of people find nostalgic. Now, think about that for a second. A rat that smells like rain? It's a strange combination, but maybe it makes sense. While most of the other nightmare critters have scents that match their personalities, like Icky Licky's coffee or Raby Baby's bubblegum, Tui's scent hints at something different. It's like a reminder of something familiar, something that feels natural, even if their personality is anything but. The scent of petrichor could symbolize Tui's connection to the earth, to the raw, gritty world of the factory's underbelly, where everything is damp, forgotten, and waiting to be picked apart by someone like them. Now, let's move on to the big question. What role will Tui play in Chapter 4? Given their personality, Tui's not gonna be the kind of character who actively hunts you down like Huggy Wuggy or Mommy Longlegs. They're a scavenger, more likely to be found lurking in the corners, picking through trash, and occasionally popping up to share some insight on the junk they've collected. But that doesn't mean Tui won't be a threat. Imagine trying to navigate a maze-like section of the factory filled with garbage, and there's Tui leading you deeper into the mess, all the while distracting you with random chatter. They might even use the knowledge of the factory's hidden nooks and crannies to set traps, luring you into areas where you have to wade through obstacles and piles of debris just to get away. Tui's role could be less about direct confrontation and more about creating a sense of unease. They're like the eyes and ears of the factory, someone who is always there, watching, collecting, and hoarding. And if they know the layout of the factory's darkest corners, they could lead you straight into the heart of it. It's possible that Tui might even be a guide of sorts, leading you towards certain items or areas, but always with an ulterior motive. They're not guiding you out of the kindness of their hearts. They're leading you because it benefits them. Maybe they want to trade information for something you found, or maybe they're just using you to access parts of the factory they've been curious about. But at the end of the day, you can bet that whatever Tui does, it's gonna be on their terms. Which brings us to the next question. How will we see Tui's personality expressed in the game? Tui's a talker, so it wouldn't be surprising if we hear their voice as we explore certain areas. Imagine wandering through a section filled with trash and you start hearing this low murmur, only to realize it's Tui rambling on about some random piece of junk they found. They might even interact with the environment in unique ways. For example, if you try to pick up an item, Tui could suddenly pop out, telling you some convoluted story about how they found that exact same item in a different part of the factory. Their dialogue could be full of random, useless facts about the factory's garbage, making them both amusing and incredibly frustrating to deal with. And don't forget, Tui's got a nose for the weird and forgotten. They're the type to collect items, hoard things that everyone else would overlook. So it's possible that as you explore, you'll come across little collections of junk that Tui has put together. Random bits and pieces that don't seem to make sense until you realize they're all connected by Tui's twisted logic. These collections could even serve as clues, a way for Tui to communicate with you indirectly, like a breadcrumb trail leading you deeper into the factory. But there's also a darker side to Tui's personality. For a character who talks so much, there's a lot they're not saying. Why are they so obsessed with trash? What are they really looking for? Tui's constant need to collect and hoard could hint at a deeper insecurity, a fear of being forgotten or discarded, just like the trash they surrounded themselves with. It's as if they're clinging to these items, hoping to find something meaningful in the things that everyone else has thrown away. And that's where things really get interesting, because while Tui might seem like a harmless, talkative scavenger, there's a desperation lurking beneath the surface. They're driven by something, a need to gather and collect, to piece together a world from the factory's discarded remains, and that desperation could make them far more dangerous than they appear. Now, another question is, how might Tui's love for trash and insightful commentary come into play in Chapter 4? Imagine navigating dark, eerie corridors filled with forgotten toys, and you suddenly hear Tui's voice echoing through the halls, spouting random observations about the trash scattered everywhere. It's not just spooky, it's unsettling in a way that really fits the Nightmare Critters theme. Maybe Tui even uses his environment to his advantage. In a room filled with garbage, he could camouflage perfectly, making him difficult to spot and setting up for some serious jump scares. With his pronounced sense of smell indicated by his petrichor scent, he might even have the ability to track the player. Think about it. Tui is a character who isn't just another creepy face, but actively follows your trail, adding tension as you navigate through the Playtime Co's depths. He could be the type to lie in wait, surrounded by trash, giving the player a false sense of security. Just as you think you're alone, you turn a corner, and there's Tui, rattling off some fun fact about the junk around him before he goes in for the attack. It's that mix of his talkative nature and trash obsession that makes him unpredictable and ultimately terrifying. Now, let's look at his scent, petrichor, the smell of rain-soaked earth. It's a bit unusual for a rat character, isn't it? But this choice could hint at something deeper. Petrichor is often associated with renewal or the end of a dry spell. Could Tui represent some kind of revitalizing force in the Twisted Nightmare Critters lineup? Or maybe he's a reminder of what Playtime Co tried to do, taking something neglected or discarded and attempting to give it new life. Except, of course, it all went horribly wrong. In this light, petrichor isn't just about the fresh scent after rain, but also about the creepy aftermath of a failed experiment, the lingering odor of something once alive, now left to rot. Tui's scent adds another layer to this character. You'll smell him before you see him, and that rinky-dinky stinky air could signal that he's nearby, watching, waiting, ready to strike. But this isn't just a coincidence. Every Nightmare Critter's scent seems to align with their role and personality. Petrichor gives Tuli a creepy, almost ghostly presence, like he's been lurking in the shadows long before you arrived. And as you dive deeper into the Playtime Co facility, this scent could act as a haunting reminder of Tui's presence, like he's always one step ahead, waiting for the right moment to pounce. But moving on, another question is, will we actually see his personality traits when we finally encounter him? With all the chatter about being a trash rodent and his insightful commentary, it's likely Tui will be constantly talking or making remarks even as he stalks you. Maybe he'll mock the player, calling them out on their choices or commenting on their progress, all the while hiding in the shadows or darting around the junk-filled rooms. This could add a psychological layer to the encounters. If you're already on edge, hearing his voice echo through the hallways, it could heighten the fear, knowing he's close, yet never knowing when he'll show himself. And when he finally does appear, it won't just be a straightforward chase. You'll be dealing with a critter who's as sly as he is quick, using his knowledge of the trash-ridden surroundings to his advantage. Lastly, the Nightmare Critters logo provides some subtle hints too. We've seen how the colors and symbols in the logo match the various critters. The blue in the logo is the same as the blue on the dead fish pendant, but I'm leaning more towards the gray letter T in the middle. It's these little details that Mob Entertainment has hidden in plain sight that suggest each critter has a deeper connection to the overall aesthetic and lore of the game. So what's the big takeaway? Tui is shaping up to be more than just another creepy character. He's a talkative, street-smart rodent with a fascination for trash and a personality that seems designed to get under the player's skin. His scent, his environment, and his trash obsession all point to a character who uses his surroundings to his advantage, making him a perfect fit for the Nightmare Critters lineup. With that in mind, I'm really curious to see how his personality traits will translate into gameplay mechanics. Will he be a persistent presence, constantly talking, lurking, and popping out when we least expect it? Or will he be a master of his environment, blending into the trash around him, only to strike when you're most vulnerable? Either way, Tui brings a unique energy to the Nightmare Critters, adding a layer of dark humor and eerie unpredictability. Maggie Mako is the latest Nightmare Critter we've been introduced to, and just from her description alone, we can tell she's a little different from the others we've seen so far. She's got that unmistakable shark grin, wide and full of sharp teeth. And if that wasn't intimidating enough, she's got an attitude that screams, "I'll eat anything and everything in my sight." Maggie's design is bright blue, a stark contrast to the darker colors we've seen on some of the other critters. But don't let that fool you. She's got this tough look, complete with a shark tooth pendant that hints at her love for food and maybe even a bit of a wild side. What's particularly interesting about Maggie is her scent, chocolate. Now, you might be wondering, why chocolate? Well, if you think about it, chocolate isn't exactly the healthiest food out there. And honestly, you don't even need to think about it. It's rich, sweet, savory, and Maggie doesn't care about healthy eating or balanced diets. She's all about pleasure and instant gratification. This might tell us a lot about her character. We know she loves sweets, but veggies? That's a big no from her. This gives Maggie a kind of rebellious streak, like she's not interested in following the rules or listening to advice. She's gonna do what she wants, eat what she wants, and she probably is gonna laugh at anyone who tries to tell her otherwise. Now, as we think about what role she might play in Chapter 4, let's consider her personality. She's driven by food, plain and simple, so it wouldn't be surprising if her interactions with the player involve trying to catch them, just to see if they'd make a good snack. If Maggie does show up in Chapter 4, I can imagine a sequence where you're being chased through a room full of food supplies, maybe an old cafeteria or a storage area. Maggie could be sniffing out anything remotely edible, and that includes you. In terms of gameplay, Maggie's obsession with food could be used in interesting ways. Imagine a mechanic where you have to distract her by throwing pieces of food or activating traps that lead her away. But here's the twist, Maggie's not stupid. She's likely to catch on after a while, maybe even getting faster and more relentless with each distraction. It's like feeding a bear in the wild. Sure, it works the first time, but once they get a taste for it, they become a lot more aggressive. And if you've been following the lore, you might wonder why Playtime Co. would create a character so focused on food. It kind of makes you think back to Picky Piggy. So what's the purpose here? Well, Maggie's relentless hunger could be a twisted commentary on consumption and excess. Playtime Co. always had a knack for taking something innocent, like a toy's love for food, and warping it into something dangerous. So is Maggie Mako more than just a food-obsessed shark? Her attitude and love for indulgence could reflect a child's unchecked desires. If she was once a child, maybe she was one who couldn't resist sweets, who had no self-control, and now that trait has been amplified into a monstrous obsession, a creature that will never be satisfied no matter how much she eats. So let's take this a bit further. If Maggie's role in Chapter 4 is as predatory as it seems, it's not hard to imagine that her obsession with food will be her main driving force, but also a potential weakness. You'd probably need to outsmart her rather than outrun her. Think about it, with that kind of relentless hunger, Maggie's likely to be easily distracted by anything edible. But here's the catch, she's not just mindlessly gobbling up anything in sight, she's got preferences. The way she sneers at the idea of veggies tells us she's picky, and it wouldn't be surprising if you had to use her favorite treats as bait in the game. Now, where would you find these treats? Imagine an old, rundown cafeteria in the depths of Playtime Co., stocked with old vending machines, stale candy bars, and jars of preserved sweets. That's Maggie's playground. You could be tasked with finding food items around the factory to lure her away from key areas, but the twist is she's quick to catch on. Maybe the first few food items work to distract her, but soon she starts ignoring anything that doesn't immediately tempt her palate. That's when things get a bit tricky. Now, let's consider her environment and how it might be designed to complement her character. Maggie's all about indulgence and gluttony, so imagine this. You're navigating through a maze-like food storage facility filled with towering shelves of expired snacks and other decomposing food products. It's dark, damp, and absolutely stinks. Ever so often, you catch a whiff of chocolate, Maggie's signature scent, which probably grows stronger the closer she gets. I don't know how we would even smell it because the character's never spoken, but maybe, just maybe. But what's the symbolism behind this scent? While chocolates might seem sweet and harmless, it also represents decadence and indulgence, and it's incredibly addictive. This aligns with Maggie's nature. She's not just hungry, she's insatiable, always craving something more, something richer. It's almost like she's consumed by her own desires, which makes her a potentially tragic figure. Was she once a child who was never satisfied? Did Playtime Co. take that trait and amplify it into this monstrous obsession? And speaking of her childlike traits, it's easy to imagine how her personality might be reflected in her interactions with the player. I'd expect to see glimpses of humor mixed with an undercurrent of danger. Maggie's not just another mindless monster. She has a personality. The idea of Maggie having some level of awareness, some sense of enjoyment in the hunt, makes her even more terrifying. It's not just about survival with Maggie. She's actually having fun with it. Now, we also need to address why Playtime Co. would create a character like this in the first place. What's the purpose here? Well, as with the other nightmare critters, Maggie's obsession could be rooted in the emotional states of the child who became her. If we assume Maggie was once a child with a penchant for indulgence, that trait could have been twisted into a symbol of excess and consumption. Playtime Co. has never been about making normal toys. They push boundaries, often in cruel ways. So maybe, just maybe, Maggie is an embodiment of all the vices that Playtime Co. saw fit to experiment with, a lesson in the dangers of overindulgence. Let's not forget that the nightmare critters each have a specific trait that defines them. For Maggie, it's clearly her appetite. But what if it's more than that? What if her hunger is also a need for validation or acceptance? What if, deep down, Maggie's relentless eating is a way to fill a void, a reflection of a child who never felt whole or loved? It would be just like Playtime Co. to exploit that kind of vulnerability, to turn it into a monstrous craving that can never be satisfied. And finally, let's talk about her name, Maggie Mako. The name itself feels like a nod to her shark-like nature, but there's something playful about it too. It's almost cute, like a nickname a child might give to their favorite plush toy. Oh, but don't be fooled, ladies and gentlemen. The Mako part of her name implies that she's built for speed, for hunting. Mako sharks are known for being some of the fastest in the ocean, so it's likely Maggie shares that trait. If she gets close, running won't be an option. You'd have to think fast and act even faster. And let's be real here, with Maggie's design, there's no question she's meant to be a powerhouse in Chapter 4. She's got a look that's both intimidating and, in a twisted way, kind of endearing. She's designed to catch you off guard. One minute you're marveling at her over-the-top personality, and the next, you're desperately trying to escape those sharp teeth. So, to sum it all up, Maggie Mako is more than just a food-loving shark. She's a representation of unchecked indulgence, a living symbol of a craving that can never be satisfied. Whether she was always this way, or whether Playtime Co. made her into what she is, Maggie's one critter you won't forget anytime soon. But what do you think? Are we gonna face her in the depths of some abandoned cafeteria? Or will her influence be felt in ways we haven't even seen yet? Let me know down in the comments. Thanks for watching, subscribe, and click on this video right here.